Hello there, Sir from 17 once again. This is my Uncharted, The Lost Legacy, crushing difficulty walkthrough. This is the fourth mission, and it's called the Western Ghats. So this is the part of the game where you realise that not all chapters are created equally, because this is an incredibly long one, arguably the longest one in the game. It has the most amount of gameplay, the most amount of Uncharted-iness, and it's a long one, so strap in. It consists of 3 separate trials, but additionally you also have this rather vast area to explore and investigate, and there's a bunch of sundry activities that you can take part in. The only activity I will be taking part in is getting lost, because I take the wrong turns a lot on some of these open-worldy areas, and credit to Naughty Dog's design, they've enabled you to pretty much get to anywhere with a whole bunch of paths, so it doesn't seem like there's one set route through any area, which is really nice. So when you do take a slight detour, it's all just part of the organic level design, which is pretty cool. But the things to note that we're going to be doing in this mission, whenever you hear that noise just then, and that noise afterwards, 2 very important things. The first one is kind of that whistle that you hear. That tells you that there are enemies in your area that have become aware of you, but don't know where you are. The second one, which is the bell, tells you that they've become aware of where you are. That is my dog barking. I apologise for that, guys. Nothing I can do. It's took a while to get this commentary to you, and I have no other time but to do it right now, so I can't even stop and wait for him to stop barking, so hopefully you didn't hear it too loudly and it doesn't derail too much, but we'll just have to continue. Those 2 sound effects are going to help you do most of the encounters in this game when it comes to stealth, because they're incredibly important to understanding what is happening. Right now, I'm going on a bit of a detour. Because I've played this game before, I know that we're going to fight an armoured vehicle in this area, and this area is littered with tons of caches filled with weapons. And I was wondering as if I could come here early, maybe they would be here. So I'm going to look around these ruins, try and see if there's any area where some of that is left over, but I can confirm after checking, which you're seeing right now, it's an instanced sequence. When we come back here later on, when we have to do that fight, this is a completely different battlefield. There are plenty of different things here. So, unfortunately, I can't get any cheeky rocket launchers or any cheeky C4 or anything powerful to lead into the first area. But not to worry. I thought it was worth doing, and it enables me to have this little tangent and speak about this area, because we have to climb the tower. Climbing the tower is very reminiscent of a lot of moments in Uncharted, and to do this in this game is the same way you've done it in all the others. You're going to find the area where your character will grab, and then from there will be a sequence of grabs that you can chain until you get to your destination. There might be a couple of crumbly, rocky moments, there might be a couple of falls that were planned, a couple of rope sections like this, and job's a good one, right? That's the Uncharted ingredients that make this rather impressive action pie. Once you've done this, it's going to open up various parts of your map, and it's going to show you that there are 3 objectives, which is the different vantage points from the top of this tower. It's also going to tease you with a 4th, which is showing you that there's more than one way to play this zone. So it's entirely up to you if you want to do that, and I actually haven't done that just yet. That's something I'm going to go back and check out. But I know that there are some collectibles, and there will probably be benefits for doing it, because Naughty Dog seem pretty good at that, giving you a good reason to want to explore. Sometimes it's just the treasures, if you're into that kind of thing. This is not a walkthrough for treasures, so you're not going to find too much following this. But this is the top of the tower anyhow. This is one of those interesting moments where the character doesn't jump up to the next bit because you have to be a bit more specifically aligned. Happens quite a lot in the games, not necessarily a problem, just something that you need to be aware of. And then here we go. So this is a really interesting piece of design, this part, I think, because each of these icons leads to a separate encounter, and the engagements are always the same, but there's one aspect of them that is dynamic, which I found to be quite interesting. Once we do the puzzle, or the action sequence, or whatever is required of us, the platforming, whatever it is, at the end of it there is a puzzle that involves rotating discs to make a picture. It's a picture of the item that was in this tower. It's all very topical. depending on what tower you go towards, depends on which puzzle is more difficult. So the first one you go to will always be the simplest puzzle, the second one more complex, and the third one the complexest of them all. And it changes, because originally when I was doing this recording, after I've done my practice run, I thought I'm going to go for the hard one straight away. So for me, the hard one was the bow one, meaning the most complex one, the last one I went to. And when I went to it, it was really easy, pretty much solidifying that it is dynamic. And I wondered how many areas of this game are actually like that, where there are these subtle shifts of gameplay depending on the order that you pursue them. Because there are a couple of moments in the game where they give you a sense of freedom, and it makes me wonder, is it a lie, is it an illusion, or does it actually affect things? So there are two areas of the game where I've noticed that this can be a thing. The second one I didn't... Oh, this is interesting too. Remember this. Remember this zone right now. This area that I'm driving up is key to the armoured APC that's coming on later on. The top of this is completely blocked off by tree branches and bushes that magically spawn to stop you getting out of a battle. It's an interesting use of geometry to cock-block the player, but I thought if I mention it right now, you can commit it to memory so that when we come back here later, I can kind of give you an idea of how they've structured that battle. So just remember that that was open just then. We're going to use that later, and it's very important. But your map will tell you where to go. It will show you the icons for the collectibles that you need to pick up, and it will show you your arrow in relation to them. One thing that's really interesting in this game is when you bring your map out, it completely dead stops your car. So you cannot keep momentum from going into the map to coming out of the map. It just completely cuts your engine, which is kind of interesting. I don't know why it does that or how it does that, but it always reminds me of Far Cry 2, where if you wanted to look at the map, you had to block the vision of the road. So the amount of times you ended up crashing your car because of that very weird, bizarre design choice was high, really, really high, and kind of annoying. But people thought it was endearing, I guess, which I never understood. But this is the first area. There is a bit of a pattern to each of these areas. When you get to this particular section where there's going to be combat, they will generally have a lorry telling you that there's been a truck full of soldiers that have now got off and gone and patrolled, and it'll give you access to some interesting weapons within. It is always worth your while picking these locks, because they will give you pistols that have silencers on them, they will give you grenade launchers, they'll give you assault rifles. For instance, this rifle I've got right now is a rather powerful single-shot weapon, which it's pretty good. I like this gun a lot. Additionally, another thing that's dynamic, there are 3 areas to go to. The final area that you go to, because at that point the characters have built up a little bit more of a rapport with each other and a bit more of a friendship, Chloe will actually allow Nadine to drive the car to break the doorway. And this was the doorway on my first playthrough that broke, but this is the first choice this time. So the order that you do them dictates the order which these special events trigger, which is not the biggest thing, but I think it's interesting. So I think this is where you get attacked by the people while you're climbing. So this is actually pretty dangerous. And you can return fire at this point and shoot at them, but if you have a silenced pistol, you do not want to waste it on shooting these idiots. But if they want to kill you, there's not really much you can do here, because they have good aim, they have good weapons, and they will kill you very fast. So my strategy here to save bullets is to be really aggressive and then pull them off the cliff. And if you die, 100% up to the game at this point, because look at me, I'm like 2 bullets away from death right now, and I managed to get both of the guards without taking a bullet. You might die there. I would have probably died there on another attempt. It's just the way that the game is. And then I get pushed off the edge by Nadine, which is really nice to see. Which leads me to a topic that kind of bugs me in this game, because I haven't really gone into any criticisms of it too much as we get shot on this cliffside again, and I move over here to go into some cover. We're going to do the same strategy again, guys. We're going to save bullets, we're going to rush him, and we're going to pull him down. But one thing I noticed in The Last of Us is you constantly have a companion with you in that game for the most, right? There are a couple of sections where you don't, but for the most it is a companion-driven game. It's to help build the relationship between Joel and Ellie. I think Ellie is perfect in that game. She doesn't really affect combat too much, and every so often she comes through and does something interesting and unique, but for the most, I don't think I've ever been in a situation where I've blamed her for too much, because she seems to know when to move, when to stand still, and when to run around like a lunatic and scare you with her footsteps. This game fucks that up. The other game did as well. Uncharted 4 had instances of this where it was kind of annoying too, but this is the most annoying it's been for me personally. And I'll explain why. There's a sequence coming up later on where you are in a train yard and you have to take down a helicopter. In that moment, there is a lot of soldiers patrolling and there's a lot of opportunities to go in deep grass to take them out quietly. There are also a lot of moments where the grass is very thin, and if you come out of cover, the helicopter will spot you, so you have to pick your movements very precisely. And when the enemies are patrolling, this can lead to some kind of awkward moments. The amount of times that the NPCs that were with me would stay in the grass but refuse to move to let me pass was way too high. It got to the point where I nearly got caught twice because I couldn't get past my companion because they were in the fucking way. And I know this sounds like a tiny gripe in the grand scheme of the complexities and the achievements of this game, but when you have something as innocuous as a buddy that's constantly with you, don't have them affect gameplay like that. They take cover and force you into weird positions in cover that pretty much break the cover. They lead to these situations that I never had in The Last of Us, and maybe I was just lucky to have that. But in this game, I found the AI to be really, really annoying in getting in my way, blocking my bullets, standing in front of me, pushing me, affecting my character model, and it's just... I feel like whatever they did with this game, with the tweaks to the AI of your companion, it didn't gel as well as it did in their older games, and I never had problems with it there. Maybe I just got lucky, maybe, it's one of those things where you didn't notice it and in the other games you did, but I definitely got the sense in this one that they were getting in my way a lot, and it makes the game hard, and the game is not too difficult, but you don't want anything making it more difficult than it is. And that brings us to this sequence right now. So this is a moment where you want to stealth up until the moment where you fuck up, and then you want to kill the rest of them. That was meant to be a dropping attack, but I grabbed the ledge instead, and it kind of cocked up. But not to worry, we managed to get him down. The two most important aspects of the stealth in this game is utilising the grass and using grenades. And I know what you're thinking. Hang on a second, Chris, you just said stealth. Using grenades? Yeah. Believe it or not, using grenades from deep grass in this game does not give your position away. So if you don't want to do the perfect stealth route where you don't touch anybody and you get through there without them ever knowing you existed, you can get rid of people using grenades, and it's way more powerful than you think it would be. Wait for the enemies to cluster up, chuck a grenade, get rid of 3 of them. A lot of the encounters in this game are anywhere between 6 to about 15 enemies depending. A grenade can lower those numbers significantly, and then for everybody who you can't get with the grenade, you can then start using your silenced pistol. There is only one pitfall to the silenced pistol, and that is that it will not one-shot kill anything with a helmet. So if you shoot somebody with a helmet, it'll knock their helmet off. It's kind of video game language for, we couldn't think of a good reason to make this enemy more tanky, so instead we gave him a helmet. And I wouldn't mind if it was a ballistic mask. If the helmet had a ballistic mask, I'd be okay with that design. But it doesn't. It has nothing protecting the face. And personally, I think if you shoot them in the facey bit, they should die. If you shoot them anywhere else, it hits the helmet. It makes sense, right? That's what helmets do. But in this game, you can shoot them in the nose, and the helmet will fly off, and they'll be fine. And it's one of those weird things. I don't know why they don't just put those helmets all over their bodies, and then they will get this get-out-of-jail-free card. But of course, they're not as clever as I. But it kicks off, so inevitably we get to start shooting things, and I'm going to start shooting this guy who takes a lot of bullets, but we get him finally. He was a guy with a helmet on, and then the music tells us that there's nothing left, and so does Nadine, and we can move on. So once again, guys, you want to use the same technique that I described previously. Run around the battlefield, replenish as many grenades as you can, pick up all the weapons you're comfortable with, all the power weapons, all the more useful tools in your opinion, and move on. I think I'm going to be grabbing the Desert Eagle because it's a one-shot kill on everything but the armoured enemies. Pretty much. And I might be taking the shotgun because I love it. I love the way the shotgun hits. Unfortunately, they don't give you many opportunities to use it on crushing because it's a rather dangerous choice. And that's one of the things that I kind of, I don't enjoy about the combat in Uncharted 4 and, by extension, in this. Oh no, we're going to be taking the China Lake, there you go. I would have loved to have took the shotgun, but that's a grenade launcher, you can't pass it up. And it's gold, which tells you that it's one of the powerful tools. But I feel like a lot of these encounters, because only certain enemies rush you, and for the most they kind of keep their distance, the shotgun doesn't seem to have the same power that it's had in previous games. And you can probably make it work, definitely. There's no world, I would imagine, where you can't be too aggressive and get it to have some success. But I've noticed that the range is very limited, and being aggressive in this game always leads to punch-outs. And if you get grabbed and someone else is shooting, it's going to lead to a death. The small mercy that you have there is that the only real situation where getting grabbed usually leads to proper death is with those grabby guys, the cuddlers that I call them. They're really dangerous. They're probably the most dangerous enemy in the game. And it's apropos when you think about it, because they were the most dangerous enemy in Uncharted 4, thanks to the, was it Chapter 21, No Mercy? Because if those guys grabbed you at the end of that firefight, it was game over. But keep on climbing the temple, and we're going to be able to get to I think it's our first puzzle, as we come up here, and we walk through the wonderful graphics and the vistas. I was watching a stream the other day of somebody playing this, and they were complaining about how unrealistic the platforming is. And I always sit there thinking, who the fuck are these people who think any of this is real? Like, they're sat playing a video game complaining about realism. Of all the things to pick holes in, realism is one of those strange ones for me. Because, of course, video games are suspension of disbelief. You're playing as a female. You could potentially be a male. How have you done that? Are you some kind of puppet master? Is it some kind of strange astral projection? No, you're playing a fucking video game. That's where the end of realism should exist, right? It should be over there in the corner, sat on its own, and here is the make-believe fun of playing video games. But they didn't like how unrealistic and how just ridiculous the platforming was. Have they ever played an Uncharted? Uncharted has always had these crazy, super surreal platforming moments. They keep raising the bar, they keep pushing the envelope. You can't go back to just fucking jumping over a couple of walls and running through some fields after you've had all these ridiculous things happening to you. That's the majesty of the game. I can't understand anybody who would want the platforming to be more mundane. Because mechanically, it's quite simple, so I suppose mechanically it could get more interesting, but visually, the stuff they have you doing in this game is immaculately designed. It's designed to be visually interesting and to have just enough diversity to make it feel like you're constantly doing different things. Let's face it, we're discovering these lost civilizations that have all this ridiculously, advanced technologies, the type of stuff we can't even begin to comprehend. You can't be wanting that shit to be dull. Or there's no thrill of finding it and discovering it and then inevitably climbing up it and then watching it break, as you inevitably have to climb over it as it breaks and then survive. But credit to this game, right? Uncharted normally goes batshit crazy really quickly. I felt that this game had a lot more reserve to it. There's not that many, this is inevitably going to break, this is going to fall away, this is going to crumble, this is going to this and that. There was a lot more downtime, so it made those bigger, bombastic moments feel a lot more important. So kudos to them for that. I'm really, really glad that they were able to bring a slightly different tempo to the game. Because at this point, when you play Uncharted, it's like playing Call of Duty. You're expecting spectacle the entire time. And whenever there isn't spectacle, you're expecting the helicopter to come over the ridge, to crest over the hill and start firing missiles. You're expecting a train to explode and fly off its rails. You're expecting insanity, because that's what you're conditioned to understand that these games are going to feature. And they inevitably do. But I think that the cadence to that flow in this game is much slower and much more methodical than your standard Uncharted, and I think it works well. A lot of people have been asking, is the game the same without Drake? Because of his wisecracks and his personality and his kind of own personal story. I really, really felt his absence, but I seem to be one of the only ones. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Chloe. I never cared much for her in the other games, but I think she has quite an interesting personal journey here, and I think the story dwells on enough numbers that, you know, you do start to grow some familiarity with her and to care about her plight. Nadine is more of a cipher. She's kind of the purposeful cynic, but you still kind of understand her in a few different ways, even though she's a little bit shallower than I think Chloe is. And then by the end of the game, you have shared some history, so it does resonate a little bit more. But personally, it's not the same for me. There's something about Nathan Drake and Uncharted that kind of makes it. And don't get me wrong, this is not a knock to the game. I think the game is fine. I had a lot of fun with it. I think you'll have a lot of fun with it too. But I definitely felt an absence of more Nolan North than Nathan Drake. Because let's face it, Nolan North is Nathan Drake, you know. When I come to these games, I have a voice in my head that I expect. And that voice is telling me right now that I really dislike the mud sequences in this Jeep. So, the system here is simple. You're supposed to take momentum onto the stones to gain purchase to get up these hills when there's mud. And for the most it works perfectly fine, but every so often you can have those moments where you get that little bit of a wonky detection, or you perhaps didn't carry enough speed and you end up sliding back down it. And if you're stubborn like me, instead of backing up and then gathering speed and going up it quickly, you'll try and fight the fact it won't let you get up it, and it'll become like something from Mass Effect Andromeda where you're shouting at the fucking Mako. But here is the truck that is some beautiful foreshadowing that there's going to be enemies coming up. And that's one of my favourite aspects of, in particularly this game. Naughty Dog have really, really committed to this idea of giving you an established world to be part of in the conflict of the games. The enemies aren't just randomly here and randomly spawning. They are on patrols. They are set patterns. They exist within this territory, and they arrived here via transportation. And it's this really nice, subtle gesture that gives you more of a feeling to the battle. It gives the idea that these are mercenaries that are doing exactly what we're doing, and I think it really, really helps just the flow and the feel of the game. And this is a big encounter. I like this encounter a lot. There's a part of me that wished I'd have captured my first encounter on this particular firefight because it went well a lot better, but this is the one that we're going to be sharing. So immediately we're getting shot from a distance, and there's a guy with a shotgun going to the left. I don't have any grenades, which is a mistake coming here, but I have a China Lake. The problem with it is, I'm one of those type of people that doesn't really want to waste this gun, so I only really want to use it when I know it's going to deal maximum amount of damage, which is multi-kills and bigger enemies. I killed the guy with the shotgun just then because I had no other option, and I really like the smoke when you fire this gun. It looks wonderful. There was him throwing a grenade at me. Whenever you see an enemy throw a grenade, you want to move, because it will almost undoubtedly land very close to you, and there's no mechanic to throw it back. The only exception to this rule is when you're grabbing on a ledge. If you can drop lower on the ledge, do that, because it's the safest way of staying alive. There was one of the ultra heavies. I fired a couple of grenades until his helmet was knocked off, and then I finished him off with a shotgun. So that's pretty simple stuff. This cover right now is kind of the exception to the rule of Uncharted, especially 4 and Lost Legacy. In these games, cover is amorphous. A lot of it breaks, a lot of it is not the best cover because it's easily flanked. There don't seem to be many power positions, so every so often when you get a piece of cover that affords you a lot of safety, you have to cling to it like a long-lost lover, because it will help you, and that's what those two pillars are at the beginning of this stage. The reason they're so powerful is because there is quite a large cross to get to you, to get to a position where they can shoot you, and in that time you can kill them. And that's why that position is powerful. But this battlefield, much like many of them in this game, is very intricate. There's a lot of verticality, there's a lot of opportunities to do interesting things. The problem with crushing is a lot of those interesting things will get you killed. So be as aggressive as you want to be, but be careful. For instance, the sniper in the back there. If that laser lingers on you and you don't press circle to dodge, it's a one-hit kill, and he can kill you from some interesting ranges, so be very careful of him especially. Also, be careful moving up. Sometimes the enemies can be very sneaky, and if you're too close and you get shot too much, you're going to die. So my advice is always move up tentatively, and move up in positions of power. It's all about awareness, it's all about using the space to your benefit and giving the enemy the smallest possible window to hit you. In this game, that window is incredibly large because the third-person cover trick doesn't work. If you're not familiar with the third-person cover trick, it's pretty much when you angle yourself and your body with the camera so that you shoot out of a piece of cover without exposing your body. It was incredibly powerful in Uncharted 1, 2 and 3, but in 4 they changed the way the engine worked and eliminated it. So if you try and do it in this game, you will notice you will take a lot of damage and you will die, so be very careful of how you choose to use the cover. Right now, I'm trying to use myself as bait to get a couple of shots off so I can see where the sniper is, and lo and behold, I see the laser and I see somebody else do a few shots. So I put the Raffica on, and I'm going to try and get a quick headshot on this guy. Get a shot there. If you're wondering too with the hit markers, you might be new to console games or shooters in general, when you get the red hit marker, it signifies you've killed somebody. That is one of the most valuable pieces of information that your brain can process because it's going to tell you when to stop firing and when to start picking your next target. But I think that we're coming towards the last enemy or two, and hopefully we can then run around the battlefield, pick up some weapons, and there's one important thing you need to do here, guys. The ultra heavy guy had a machine gun. You need to pick it up and carry it towards the door that we're about to enter. If you don't do this, you're going to make the next fight coming up a lot harder than it needs to be. Additionally, if you get a bad checkpoint like I do, it won't respawn. But don't worry, if you restart the checkpoint, it should populate the world correctly. But if you, for whatever reason, do not get this machine gun at this next fight, you're in for a much bigger encounter. So if you're going to follow this walkthrough, you have to do this. Unfortunately, walking with this turret is a little bit like Halo 3, where Master Chief seems to walk incredibly slowly for some kind of balance conceit, and that's exactly what made it into this game. So you can't sprint with it, it seems, you can't roll with it, you can't jump with it, you can't do anything to kind of speed this up. But trust me, this thing is ridiculously powerful, and it's going to make some of the next encounters effortless. And once again, I wish I could have shared my first fight here, because I got the perfect fight. I really did. It went super smooth, everything went my way, it was quite wonderful. And then of course on the recording run, there was a couple of mistakes, there was a couple of bad situations, but for the most, I think the strategy is definitely going to help. If we ever get there, because of course, carrying a really heavy machine gun takes a while. But there's been... I can't really tell what the reception for this game is like. To me, and my experience with it has been very positive, but to a lot of people, maybe not so much. It's kind of interesting that way. Oh, in order to get through this door, you have to go and touch these icons that you might have seen littered around this battlefield. They look a little bit like a pirate ship wheel. Not necessarily just a pirate ship, but, you know, old boat wheel things. And I think I knew where the majority of them was, so I didn't have to wander around like an idiot trying to find them. Because that's one of the trickiest things about making something like these kind of videos. The combat and stuff is easy because you can't really miss that, but when it comes to finding everything in specific orders, and especially when it's quite a large area, it can be kind of awkward and you can get a lot of dead footage. And this is already, you might have noticed, nearly a 50-minute video. That is a long video. It just goes to show that, you know, this level is incredibly expansive. And admittedly, there's a couple of moments where I'd go on little bits of detours, but for the most, I'm just doing what's central to the narrative. You can lose at least 3 to 4 hours in this particular chapter if you explore, so you want to bear that in mind when it comes to judging the game on its replay value, because as I was saying before the door interrupted me, it's hard to pinpoint the reception for this game. Like, personally, I think it's a fun game. Critically, it's getting well received, but I'm seeing a little bit of maybe lethargy or just kind of a lack of interest in this particular title. And I don't know if it's because it's, you know, we've played a lot of these games at this point, you know, maybe there's a little bit of fatigue in there, maybe it's the absence of Drake, I don't really know what it is, but it seems like out of all of the Uncharted that I've seen, this one is getting from a lot of the vocal people on the internet, which is generally, you know, mostly the morons, let's face it, they're always the ones who speak the loudest, but there is kind of a large consensus that it's kind of, you know, same old thing, the old tired Call of Duty formula, and I don't know if that's fair. Admittedly, it does feel like a DLC. It was a DLC to begin with, so that makes a lot of sense, right? If you judge it based on its inception, I think it's exactly what it is. It is a shorter production cycle, DLC-inspired, standalone game to Uncharted 4. Because before we had DLC, we had expansion packs. And if you've never played an expansion pack, you're probably too young to know what they were. But they were essentially mods of existing game engines that created small and focused experiences. And some of them were really, really cool. Some of them have gone on to breed quite the legacy. And that's what this feels like in a lot of ways, like a fully realised expansion pack to Uncharted 4. But here is why I told you to bring this gun, because as you push forward, there's going to be a bunch of armoured fellas coming up, and there's going to be a lot of standard grunts. So the standard enemies can go down in a couple of shots from this gun if you feather the trigger, and the armoured guys will go down very quickly as well. But don't go nuts on the armoured guys, because they can tank a lot of your bullets, and you don't want them to do that. You want to get as much potential out of this as you can. And how I do this part is, when I start getting flanked, I like to push backwards, but it's difficult to tell where you're going because the sensitivity right now is dog shit. It's one of my biggest complaints about this game. The sensitivity is far too low for a player who enjoys high sensitivity. And even if you don't like high sensitivity, just the ability to quickly spin around yourself is a powerful tool in a game where situational awareness is key. And especially for me, because I've been playing on mouse and keyboard recently, so turning around on mouse and keyboard is literally not even a quarter of the flick of the wrist, and you're already looking the other direction, and you can flick backwards within a second, and boom, you know exactly what's behind you, you know exactly what's in front of you. It's very powerful. But because this game is so goddamn impressive to look at, the camera unfortunately takes a hit, because if you could spin the camera around as fast as I would like, the frame rate would shit the bed. Because if you don't know, they use many camera techniques to cue in draw distances, and whatever you're not looking at does not look like what you are looking at, and that's the reason that the game can look so good. But up here where I am right now is very important in this firefight, because it's one of the only pieces of cover on the floor that cannot be broken. Do you see those walls that he's next to that I was shooting? All of these walls can crumble, and it means that they are not good cover, and if it starts crumbling and you're in it, you're going to be in massive danger, so just don't even entertain it. But there's a surprisingly large amount of dudes here, especially if you killed a bunch of them with the machine gun. And because this guy is an armoured shotgunner, I'm going to weaken him with grenades, and I'm going to finish him with whatever gun I've got left. Normally, you can kill these guys with 2 well-placed grenades if they take the full force of the detonation, but sometimes you'll have to do a little bit extra. It all kind of depends. The Ultra guy is the only guy who should take more than 2 grenades, but as you saw just then, that guy took more than 2, so there must be some kind of sweet spot with him. So, time to loot the battlefield and listen to more of the dialogue. But this package... this game costs how much? Like 22 quid. It's a budgeted price, and you get the multiplayer of Uncharted 4. You get a survival mode that can be played without PlayStation Plus on your own, which is quite interesting. And you get the campaign with all the added bonuses that you can expect, like the ability to unlock a bunch of costumes and golden guns and a whole host of extra, tools and toys to play with on extra runs through the campaign, which is nice. There's the incentive for the trophies, there's the incentive for the literal trophies within the game. There's collectibles via that. There's a lot to the game for that price tag, and I think as far as value for money goes, it's a very difficult proposition to badmouth this game. I can appreciate the people who are, for whatever reason, expecting this to live up to Uncharted 4 in length and scope, which is kind of foolish in my opinion. But I can understand why they would, because let's face it, Naughty Dog do not release bad games. This is not a bad game by any means, this is a very good game, and it is a very self-contained, focused adventure that's actually a lot longer than I thought it was going to be, as I picked the locks in the minigame, which I really wish they'd not added. I can't think of a single thing that this adds to the experience. I really can't. It just seems like it wastes time to me, and there are a couple of sequences later on that are built on this idea of lock-picking while in peril. And I'm sorry, this is not fucking Splinter Cell. This is Uncharted. There's no need for it. Look at the trepidation, by the way, right now. I want nothing more than to take that shotgun with me. You've seen me do this in multiple videos now. I can never carry that shotgun into the next battle because I always find a grenade launcher and it always makes me sad. And that's one of the things I really want for the future of games. I want them to give us a choice, you know? So many games nowadays are rigid with this structure that they've inherited from games that did it for specific reasons, but nowadays I don't really know why they do it. It's kind of, we do it because we've always done it. And I wish that would change, because if you look at games, older games, from the generation of things like Doom and Quake, those games were always about tons of different weapons. A dude running around with no pockets carrying 1,000,000 guns. They were awesome, right? Those games were still really hard, and they were really hard because the game was tough regardless of the tool you chose to use, and that's what made them fun. And then we move forward into the more realistic / restricted versions of those games, and you get things like your Halos, which is one of the first instances of 2 weapons I can remember of, and then everything else bloody copied it. So we've gone from literally having a file of facts filled with deadly weapons to carrying 2. And if you play Max Payne 3, he literally carries 2 weapons. He has one in his offhand that he doesn't use and then fires with his other hand. It's a really weird thing that was kind of cool for the time. But I remember the days where, you know, like look at stuff like Ratchet and Clank and those games where you're a third-person shooter and you've got 50 different guns. You know, the idea of losing out your weapons and your armaments because they don't want you to have too much of an advantage in a battle. Couldn't they just balance the game around you being a walking tank? Because you still die really fast, the cover's still trash, the enemies see through all the foliage. Like, you're still in the exact same game. The only difference is you spend less time running around like a twat on the battlefield looking for bullets, and you actually get to shoot them with a nice, you know, plethora of fantastical weaponry. Because when you go into the menu for this game and you look at the models for the guns, because you can get the gold versions, there's like 20 different guns. 20 different guns, and you can carry 2. And admittedly, crushing definitely nerfs your ammo. You barely get any ammo in these guns, let alone when you pick it up off other guns. So you spend a lot of the times, you know, picking up weapons during a mission, during the battle. And sometimes that can be kind of cool, and it can breed to that kind of diversity in that, you know, you've got to jerry-rig your path through the battlefield to constantly stay armed. And I do think that there's merit to that. But I would love to play these games with just guns over my shoulder, like 20 guns on my back, and I'm just pulling them and being able to have a lot of fun. And I've been using a lot of cheat engines when I play PC games recently. And I've been using things like infinite ammo in games where you don't get enough ammo in the fun guns, so you spend no time with them at all. And I've been using those fun guns at length and having so much fun with it and wishing that the games were designed differently. Because is there anything more frustrating than having a super cool, amazingly awesome weapon and then never being able to fire it? It comes back to the good old days of, you know, Final Fantasy RPGs, where you would store these super precious, awesome get-out-of-jail moment items like Mega Elixirs and Phoenix Pinions and insert whichever item was really strong, and you would save them for an encounter that never comes because you would just find ways to cope without them, and in the end you realise you probably should have been using them, and a lot of the better players probably were, but you just kept saving them because you were like, but what about the next situation? What about the super boss? What about the final boss? And then they never get used, so they have this fantastic item that all you do is hoard it, and it can definitely translate into a game like this, because what happens when you get an explosive in these games, especially on a harder difficulty? You feel like you have to make every round count. I can't even tell you the amount of times I restarted checkpoint because I missed a shot, and I was like, I can't have that. I can't waste this precious resource. And I think that is a cool feature, but at the same time, it forces a frugal playstyle on players that doesn't emphasize enjoyment. And I can understand why, because you know when you pick crushing, I forgot to mention this by the way, I think, you can select crushing from the very beginning on this game. You do not have to unlock it, which is really, really good. Because when the Uncharted collection came out and you had to unlock Brutal by beating crushing, some of the most miserable runs of my life. And It's just because I didn't want to be doing it. I wanted to be playing brutal. Forcing me to play an easier difficulty is just demotivational to me, and that's the reason why those walkthroughs took as long as they did, because I didn't want to play the game. But here is the next interesting firefight. So, optimally, you want to throw 2 grenades over there to get rid of these first 2 guys. If done correctly, did you see how the heavy guy got killed? So I think I must have thrown them too quickly before, maybe something like that. But now, if you get lucky, the rest of these enemies will line up like this, so you can use another 2 grenades to hopefully get rid of those. And then once that's done, that time the armoured guy got away, so that wasn't as fortunate. I go to try and aim at him, and immediately the awareness on crushing gets me spotted, so we start to fight. I don't really want to shoot from this position because I've got a suppressed weapon, and the suppressed weapon, in my opinion, is best used to try to be stealthy. I've already fucked that up, so alas, I'm using this gun. The only reason I'm doing this, guys, is because I can't find any other gun to shoot at the moment, and I don't want to waste the China Lake on anything but necessary targets like him. So you'll notice I'm going to try and take this guy on with as many shots as possible just to waste all my precious bullets, but I managed to put him down. And we've got 5 bullets left, so it's not too bad. And that's the end of the firefight. That one of my favourite firefights in the game. It's short, it's concise, it's got punch. I like everything about that one. Definitely one of my faves. So once again, guys, pick up everything you can. Take the weapon whichever gives you the most options, the most bullets, the most opportunities to deal death, and then continue on with the game. We're coming up now on... There's only one trial left, and it is the puzzle one, which, if you're looking forward to another firefight, I think we get one more firefight, but then I think it's just puzzles, and then we can move towards the next part of the game. But at the moment, I'm just looking for cheeky grenades. Every so often, you can sometimes stumble across a little grenade somewhere that they've dropped. It doesn't always pay dividends, but definitely look out for it. And then we can climb on and proceed. So we were talking about value for money with the game, right? All the stuff that you can unlock, and we were talking about weapons and the whole Halo effect, even though Halo might not have created the limited weapons, and talking about playing on PC with cheat engine and using guns with infinite ammo and having a lot of fun with it. And this is the Gauntlet, by the way, guys. The puzzle here is each time you step on a platform, it will move forward these clockwork soldiers, and you need to exploit the platforms to make sure you don't get hit. This is actually a perfect gauntlet that you're about to watch, so if you want to see how to do this without making any mistakes and get the trophy for doing that, follow this video. But I really do believe that you can have a game that gives you plenty of offensive options while still being very difficult. And a good example of this, in my opinion, is a game called Vanquish. If you don't know what Vanquish is, please check it out. It's available on PC right now. It's very cheap. It's an amazing game. It is kind of the Devil May Cry equivalent of third-person shooters, and if that sentence appeals to you at all, you will probably really enjoy the game. But in that game, you can carry 4 weapons, and it's not exactly 24, which is what I would make it, but you can carry 4 at any given time. Technically 3, because one of those is grenades. So 3 weapons is one more than 2. But 3 weapons in that game feels like a really good number. It feels like you have a tool for each option that you need. You've got a good mid-range tool, a good close-range tool, and a good long-range tool. Or something powerful, something accurate, and something situational. And it works really well in that. And I even think more weapons would have worked just as well. Because it's one of those games that really shapes itself to the idea that a weapon is for a certain situation. And I think that that's something that we've lost a lot in games nowadays. In times not long since by, when you played a game that had a lot of weapons, you quickly realised that each of them was a piece of a jigsaw puzzle, and each piece had its place. And that is something that I think we've kind of lost. And I like that approach to design. And I don't think you have to abandon the old ways or the new ways. I think you can make a combination of the two to constantly challenge the expectation of the player. They could have moments where your arsenal is limited, and it's limited due to plot reasons, to give the plot some kind of moments of excitement and some moments of peril. Think of the classic scene in Aliens, where you have these space marines who are all armed to the teeth, macho, gung-ho, very capable, and they're put in a situation where they cannot fire their weapons because their weapons will trigger, bad things to happen. So they've gone from being 100% capable of defending themselves and giving you faith that they can survive the xenomorphs, but they can't shoot now. So how the hell do they stay alive in a den of these beasts when they can't fight back? There are plenty of ways to create this kind of effect and make it integral to the gameplay, while still giving us plenty of options to have fun with your game. Because I always wonder, and I don't know if you wonder the same, what's the point in making 20 plus weapons if you can only carry 2 at the same time? That being said, you will use certain parts in certain areas because it just works better and you've committed it to memory. This will be good here, that will be good there. And there's definitely strategy to that. But it'd be really nice to just be like, oh, shit's hit the fan, I'll put this gun on. Oh, that didn't quite work, I'll swap to this one. Oh, this is running a bit low, I'll save this for this one. Oh, there's the fast guy, I'll get the fast guy gun. The idea of constantly shifting between your inventory is something that I really like, as long as it's presented in a good way. I'm a big fan of weapon wheels, and I'm a big fan of weapon wheels that slow down the game. Or freeze the game, even better. Because there's nothing worse than having to keep going into menus and come out and keep going into menus and come out, a la, Resident Evil 4. It was okay for the time, and it's okay for survival horror, but I wouldn't want that in Uncharted, because that is just something else. But right now, now that you've done this, you can then progress towards the waterfall that's opened up with the new motif. But for some reason, I always like to go back to the central tower before I do this, and I couldn't honestly tell you why I do it, but I do. So, for the people who already know their way around this area, feel free to skip straight to the area you need to go to. This is going to be our scheduled detour of the video, but fear not, we'll be getting on with the rest of the game, and there's only 3 parts of the game, as I've mentioned, that I think you're going to struggle with, if you struggle at all. The first one is the armoured vehicle, because you have to hurt that thing a lot to kill it, and it's very easy to fuck up. The second one is a gunfight where you have no weapon, and it's real close quartered, and there's a bunch of those grabby guys and a bunch of armoured guys, and you die fast, really fast in that one. And then the final one is the helicopter bass. I don't know why I said that. I think I meant to say boss, and then I got confused by something. But yeah, the helicopter bass. A giant fish or guitar, depending on your preference. That is just, once again, it's a victim of the way this game is designed. Arbitrary amount of times to hurt said vehicle, arbitrary lock-picking bullshit, arbitrary here's a ton of enemies that will turn up, and unless you get rid of all of them, the helicopter seems to know exactly where you are. Tons and tons and tons of things to discuss. But I've just talked for 47 minutes in a row, so I'm going to leave you with the end of this video, guys. This has been my Uncharted Lost Legacy walkthrough. I hope it is helping. If you're not here for the advice, I hope you've enjoyed the journey and the topics and the tangents. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for commenting, subscribing, doing all the things that you do, helping me fund me on Patreon and all those wonderful additional tools that you can do to YouTubers these days in this year of the adpocalypse. But just penultimately, thank you very much for watching.
You ready? Yeah. Just, taking it all in.